It seems like you starting to speak truth, you not necessarily hiding or lying anymore, was ultimately your own pursuit towards deeper integrity, towards deeper alignment. So I'm wondering, what did that do for you?
What it did for me is it brings me just much closer to myself. After speaking more truth, I had the first moments of actually feeling free or feeling freedom or feeling like I can be with whatever is. And I noticed my capacity for handling my emotions, but also the emotions of others went up. And a bigger sense of being present and ease and being in peace. By now, I can't really hold to things that are true for me and I haven't expressed for much longer, because also the reward, the way I feel afterwards, and the groundedness and the presence and the aliveness that comes with it is so good that I don't want to miss that anymore. Which doesn't mean it's not challenging. Man, sometimes I would much rather die than sharing that now. And then I still choose to share, and then usually it's relieving.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Bjoern Keune is a successful entrepreneur and investor with over 13 years of experience in founding and managing companies, and someone I'm proud to call a dear friend. Leaving business school before graduation to immerse himself in real-world entrepreneurship, Bjoern co-founded and served as CEO of Invincible Brands, a direct-to-consumer platform that he scaled from 0 to 120 million euros in sales within just 5 years. Despite his extraordinary achievements, Bjoern's relentless pursuit of success came at a significant personal cost. Along the way, he created numerous personas or false images of how he believed he needed to show up to fulfill the role of leading the company. To cope with the intense demands of running the business, he developed several addictions, which in his own words, ruined the health of his own body and mind. The emptiness of this reality and the worsening of his life circumstances forced him down a path of self-discovery and the search for answers. After exiting the company and finally achieving the business success he had always believed would bring him the freedom he was looking for, he realized this achievement did not offer him the liberation he truly desired. Overwhelmed by stress, disconnected from his true self, and burdened by the weight of inauthentic personas he had created, Bjoern recognized the need for radical transformation and a return to integrity with himself and his environment. It was during this time that he explored various ancient wisdom teachings, coaching, and connected with the life-altering practice of conscious connected breathwork. These tools allowed him to reclaim his sense of self and uncover a deeper connection with his inner truth. Through this journey, Bjoern gained a new perspective on life, realizing that the happiness and freedom he sought could not be achieved through his old methods alone. In our conversation together, Bjoern and I dove deeply into his own personal journey as he pursued external success. He acknowledged that along his journey, he lost sight of the very freedom he had been searching for. Instead, he became trapped in a system that left him feeling anything but free, living by the assumption that he had to be and show up in a certain way. We explored the roles and personas Bjoern adopted, repeatedly affirming to himself that he needed to be someone other than who he truly is. We also unpacked the weight of the demands he was experiencing and the vices he subsequently turned to, such as pornography, sex, and drugs, to manage the overwhelm of his circumstances and the pain of disconnection, as well as the challenge of letting these vices go when he had relied upon them to self-soothe, self-regulate, and meet unmet needs. As our conversation continued, we dove into his journey of change, including how he stepped out of the roles, personas, and identities he had created for himself, and how he embraced the emotions he had long disconnected from, particularly in relationship to grief. We discussed the power of radical honesty and what it looked like for Bjoern to return to integrity and become a man he was truly proud of. This has been an incredible conversation with someone I deeply value in my life. I commend the depth of the journey he has undertaken to get to where he is today and the wisdom that has emerged in the process. I trust that his personal journey will support you and inspire your own. All right, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode at the Heart of Man. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I feel incredibly honored and excited to be welcoming Bjoern Keune to our conversation today. Bjoern, how are we doing today?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me.
I feel incredibly honored to have you. And just a bit of background info for anyone who doesn't know Bjoern. Bjoern is very, very well known in the realms of entrepreneurship, especially in Germany. He's a successful entrepreneur, investor, and advisor, and he's most well known for his contribution and being the founder and the CEO of the brands called Invincible Brands, an e-commerce that grew from 0 to 100 million euros in just 5 years. So this is one of the things that, from what I know about you, very much drove you for many years, that pursuit for success. And having to come to know you here in Bali now, I've come to recognize an entirely different side of you. One of the things that I kind of addressed before we started rolling was, I think one of the most unique things about you right now is that you are coming from this place of having the thing that so many individuals are desiring, so many individuals are wanting. And at the same time, from what I as well know about you, there's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of trials and tribulations that came with your pursuit for success. So to bring a bit of an understanding and to introduce you as well to our audience, I would like to just begin off by just giving you an opportunity just to speak into, first of all, who you are, and as well, what's made the drive for success and the pursuit into entrepreneurship so important to you.
Part of the reason why I'm here is also because wanting to learn who I actually am. So, I'm happy to share a bit about my past and what brought me here. And since you mentioned the entrepreneurial journey at the beginning, like I would say that, someone very early, end of childhood, beginning of like teenager, I felt like a deep longing for freedom. I already back then felt like the world consists of like a constant demand. Like I couldn't like say qualify or quantify that demand, but just felt like pressure and demand and like a strong desire for freedom. And at some point I decided, okay, if I want to achieve that freedom, I would have to make a lot of money. That is a way out, a way of being free from demand, being free from the system. I did not really enjoy, school, and I was pretty good there. Like I was always performing well, but it was always pressure, always demand, and like I felt completely unfree and trapped. So then I said, okay, my way out is through money, basically. And then I quickly learned that apart from winning the lottery, the best way to get there is becoming an entrepreneur. And so with that idea, I embarked on that journey and left home, went to university, quickly figured out that also university won't get me what I want. So I left university without finishing it, have no degree or anything. And then went to Berlin in Germany and started to build companies. And they're really, my first company was more like in the, let's say, healthcare. So we were building a platform for making doctor's appointments available online. This was like a 6 years of like, really tough journey, raising money, but the business was never profitable and really fighting hard for it. But lots of lessons learned there. And eventually I found a way out that was, let's say, face saving for everyone. And then created another company that you mentioned at the beginning, Invincible Brands, like the e-commerce holding, that was at the right place at the right time, also with the right people, and also a bit with the right idea, but it's actually more about being at the right place at the right time. And then that company became quite big, and eventually I was able to sell it to a bigger company and then achieve that financial freedom that I've been looking for so many years. Thing is that on that journey, I'm actually lost what I was looking for because I'd created a system that made me be completely not free. I lived under the assumption that I have to show up in a certain way, be in a certain way. Basically, I put on a mask and I was kind of hiding behind that mask, like my true self. And with that, I was actually unfree most of the time. And that led to tons of, let's say, internal stress. Probably one thing to make that mask very concrete, I would hide most of my emotions. I wouldn't, let's say, show myself vulnerable or expressing emotions. And at some point, I even, let's say, lost contact to any emotions, basically. And with all that stress that came from having to be someone else, then that's what who I truly am. And on top of that, obviously, building a business and making it scale fast and stuff is something that already is stressful. But then if I do it in a way that is, let's say, very distant from myself and I'm not authentic and it's not a true expression of myself and I don't really put my heart in it, then that's additional stress on top of that. And on that journey, I developed all sorts of, let's say, coping mechanisms to kind of get through that journey. So yeah, maybe something for us to like dive deeper into a little bit later, but really not living, from a authentic, connected, heart opening place,
Right.
more from a closed, distant from myself, distant from people, disconnected.
Yeah.
And yeah.
There's a lot in what you already said and a lot of things that I would love for us to dive into. One of the first things that I think could be really valuable for us to explore a little bit more is this search, this pursuit, this desire for freedom. Because, I speak to a lot of men specifically. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And I can relate to this conversation around wanting more freedom. And it's this conversation around wanting freedom from the circumstances that they're currently having. So usually the desire, what I notice, gets cultivated from a position of pain. So you spoke to feeling particular demand and pressure already in your early years. Could you clarify that a little bit more around where did you not feel free to be you or free of your circumstances?
So I would say it's like an ongoing investigation because like even here on Bali and like where it's actually a perfect kind of place and surrounding environment to actually relax and downshift, I still notice that when I'm very calm, I still do feel this demand, although there's not really, let's say, a lot of external demand right now, but still feeling that demand that creates pressure. So that's something that's like deeply ingrained in my nervous system, I would say, in my belief system. However, there are a few obvious ones, right? Like the way I grew up was like there was the moment I entered the school system, there was lots of pressure to be among the best, to perform. Like I was learning the stuff from the next year or already the year before to then be in the very top. So that was creating lots of demand. I would even say there was like in my upbringing, there was some anxiety being created by saying like, if you're not good, you will be excluded. You will not be part of the group. It will always like be an extremely difficult experience, so better perform to belong. So that's something I believe. And then also at some point I made the connection, so if I perform in let's say, through the lens of society, if I'm performing, I receive love. So then for one of my core needs to be met, I needed to perform. And I made that connection. And then for sure, like being loved and accepted, especially by the parents, but also like the social group and environment, is really like a core need for me as a human being. Now then, if that is connected to performance, that's for sure there's like this constant demand. There's this demand for performance to have my core needs met. Yeah, being accepted, being loved, being included, being in community, being seen. And so I think that was a big part of it. And I think at some point what I like, especially I'd say in school, what I learned very quickly is that, okay, fast track to feeling that acceptance and to being part of the group is to giving up on my most authentic expression. So I give you an example. I love nature and I love to be in nature. I used to go fishing when I was younger, and I did a few things that, let's say, most people I'd say in my social group back then would consider uncool. So I gave up on these things very fast and did all sorts of things that I'm actually not so much interested in to be part of the group. My truest expression would have been to spend half a day in nature, or I connect with the forest and go fishing and do all these type of things. But then I would hide these and go into activities of my peer group that I actually deep inside didn't really enjoy. I just did that to be part of the group. So I was taught that is very important. And that's kind of where the not being free already started.
If I could just chime in here,
Sure.
because what I'm noticing is that, sure, on the surface there was this desire for freedom, but I'm seeing that there is whole other aspects that are at play that I imagine so many of us can relate to. And the thing that I'm hearing is that in many ways, the culture that you grew up in, the society that you grew up in, there was already this narrative that being simply yourself is already not enough. It's not okay. And so there is this requirement for you to show up in a particular way, to be better than, right? And to because otherwise you will not get love, and your need for belonging, which is one of our primary needs, will not get met. And so in order to do that, there is naturally, already as young children, there is already this inquiry around who do I need to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which then takes us away from our authenticity. But just like being ripped away from our own authentic expression, I imagine, or let me speak for myself. That was my deepest pain, and that's where my pursuit for freedom was coming from. But it was coming more from this position of I disconnected from my own authenticity. Of course, unbeknownst to me, I wasn't aware of it, and it was as well not my fault, considering based on the environment that I was in, it required me to do so. It demanded me to do so, and the thing that I'm hearing is that it seems to have been very similar as well for you.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say this, and ultimately this, it led to me thinking, okay, if I can basically just, in a certain way, if I had enough money, I can be free of all these things, and then I can finally be myself, because then I don't need any of the other people to give me anything. I don't know exactly how I made that connection, but I look at it, it's like, okay, but that's also after like 5 years of, let's say, spiritual personal development work. But do I look at it like how does that make sense? But back then it made sense for me to then, okay, I can basically be free of the demands, and I can just be myself, and I can just be with myself and be happy and in peace and in freedom with myself, if I just have the resources and I'm not dependent on anyone else anymore.
Yeah.
I think the idea was that, like, the moment I don't need anyone to meet my core needs, then I can just be myself and still get my needs met in a certain way. And
Right.
somewhere in that, I put in the idea of, okay, the way out is financial success.
And that in many ways is, as I see it, the promise of freedom, the promise of external freedom, the myth of external freedom. So I'm wondering, where is the disparity here, or at least based on your own experiences, how did that not come into fruition when you had the money, when you had the success, when everything was accomplished that you were pursuing? How did that not lead to that experience of freedom that you were looking for? And if you want to as well bring in that experience in order to just share as well the story of what that was like, feel free to do that.
Yeah, on the way to achieving that freedom, I had lost connection to myself, and I started to live from a place with a very much closed heart. And I had also hardened in a certain way, and became very distant from myself, but also like other people. And I think there are a few components to it. Like, one were for sure, let's say, the external circumstances. So that was building the company, and which in itself is already kind of a stressful endeavor. Then second thing that was really causing immense stress for me was that, so my wife, today ex-partner, but back then wife, she started to suffer from a normally terminal lung disease, which was very present for many years. And then there was at the end, there was like an innovative drug from the US that really kind of saved her life. So today she's much better, but for many years that was very present. And that was like an additional stress that was part of my life. And with these things, and with, let's say, also living and in that very inauthentic way, and like having learned that lesson, so if I suppress my most authentic version of myself, I will get where I want to. By the time I had that freedom, I lost the ability to actually feel joy or to actually appreciate life. And I was really in a state of like, fuck this, I don't need any of these experiences. Like, at the very peak, I wouldn't know why to get up in the morning. There was absolutely no reason for me anymore. And I was even like thinking, and I back then also wrote that as a message to one of my coaches. I was saying, like, if that is the last day of my life today, that's fine. I don't need another experience like that. And in order to actually feel alive, I had turned to porn, heavy porn addiction. I turned to drugs such as cocaine. I had started to cheat on my partner with prostitutes, and basically to just get an access to feeling alive and to let go of some of that stress, and to not be, actually the main thing is to not be in the here and now, to not be in to not be me for a moment in a certain way, not that version of me, and just to actually feel alive.
Yeah.
And with that, the money couldn't actually help me to achieve a level of freedom because I simply wouldn't feel it anymore. It was gone. The best, like I've been in the nicest places on that planet, and I still felt like I'm not fully here. I was already in my head somewhere else and stressed about something. And then obviously I had created all this like this cheating and lying, and just like I simply couldn't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the willingness to as well bare yourself so openly. And I definitely just want to, for now, bookmark some of the, let's say more mechanisms that came alive in order to tend to that sense of disconnection that occurred. What I would love to bring a bit more understanding to is that prison that you've created for yourself, and to deeply understand how in the pursuit for freedom you ultimately created circumstances for yourself where you ended up not feeling free. So what would you spoke to a few things already, like disconnecting from your needs and your wants, but I wonder if there is anything else that's here that could be important for listeners to know about what led to that sense of disconnection, or who were you required to be in order to create the success for yourself that you ultimately created?
I would say so one assumption I had about, let's say, a person that can achieve that success and that freedom, that would be a person that is very, let's say, controlled, like not emotional. I would be the person that always gets everything right and done and can basically never says no and like can handle everything. So I created that image of that person that I can handle the business, I can handle the disease of my wife, I can turn to whatever demand is there from maybe from an employee or investor or from a friend, whatever, doesn't matter. I can basically be there and take care of everything, and I manage. So I never say no, and I never show any weakness. I never show that I'm maybe overwhelmed and that I don't have the answers. Also, like the part of the image was like always having an answer, always being able to deliver and perform in a certain way. Also, that idea of I can't really express my true needs and desires
Why is that?
because that they would contradict that image that I have created, that I thought like the way I need to be or the way that I was showing up, let's say, in the world. For example, I had a desire for deep rest, but then that would contradict the image of that person that can basically attend to any demand, any request that's coming in, not allowing for deep rest or yeah. And honestly, I was just there without any boundaries in terms of stuff that I can take on. Yeah, I think that these are the main ones that come to mind right now. There's probably a few more, but most of it had to do with portraying a certain image
Yeah.
of that person that has control is a big one. Like the person that has everything under control.
Yeah.
You can just throw more stuff on top, no problem.
Mm.
I can control that.
And I wonder as well if it's like if this image or this identity that you've created for yourself, if it goes beyond just being the successful entrepreneur, but because I often hear this narrative among men, right? I gotta be the strong one. I gotta be the one who has it all figured out. I gotta be the one who has everything under control. But as soon as we impose such absolute statements on ourselves, we have to ultimately disconnect from the other side of things. And so what that leads to is, we can't own our limitations, we can't own our desires, our needs, our boundaries, ultimately our authentic expression, our emotions. And as I see it, that's ultimately, so what we really have to disconnect from is our human qualities. And so if there is no way for us to bring those into expression, the only way out is out of the body, right? And that's kind of like the thing that I really heard when you spoke of that one message that you sent to your coach at the time, where there was a sense of deep meaningless that occurred as a result of that.
Totally. I would say so that I never, up until now, and slowly I'm starting to get a more sense of it, but up until now I haven't, let's say, really found something that gave me very, like, at least not in business, let's say, something that gave me really deep meaning.
Mm.
I always felt like, okay, I need to do that now. I need to build this business. I need to achieve that freedom
Mm.
to then be somewhere. But I never felt like, oh, that's the fullest, truest expression of myself. And I think that is already a problem in the very long run.
When you felt that sense of meaninglessness in your life, was that the kind of the moment where a lot of the, let's say, more compensatory strategies started coming alive?
I'd say what peaked in these moments, which was also, let's say, towards the very end of actually using these coping mechanisms, but what really started to peak was I started to care less on, let's say, the impact of substances on my body. I actually noticed myself, like, especially when it came to cocaine, that I like them. I just go without any kind of really limits or anything. I noticed how I would really care less about potential damage to my body. The coping mechanisms have been there for longer, even before. And I wouldn't say that they really peaked, like, at least not in terms of, let's say, sex, but in terms of substance, definitely peaked around that time.
Yeah.
Also simply because substance is even stronger than sex, at least for me, like, it kind of, pushes me out of my current life experience. And I'd also say that sense of meaninglessness has been around for many, 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 many years. I'd even say, like, probably since I've been in school, I always felt like a little bit of, like, what the fuck is that all about? What am I actually doing here? Why I'm here? And none of these things, none of the experience I went through started to give me an answer to that. There was already, like, a search for it. And then over time, the intensity of that feeling increased. And I could see more and more of these stories actually not filling that gap or not filling that hole. As a child, it would have been, let's say, achieving a good grade in school. But then 2 minutes later, there's the next test coming. So what the fuck, like, it's not going to fill that. And then with the money, it was the same. First million comes in and 2 minutes later, it's like, okay, but where do I find the next? Where do I find the next? And then never stops. It just goes on forever. There's no external answer to that.
I wonder as well if that's kind of the freedom that you were seeking from, like the meaninglessness of everything that you kind of experienced so early on, and there was this deep, deep desire for a sense of aliveness and feeling a sense of connection to everything. One of the things that we spoke about before we started rolling with the interview is that it can be so easy for us to demonize all the numbing, let's say, strategies that we use, whether it's porn, whether it's cheating, whether it's drugs. And I want to make clear is I don't necessarily condone those behaviors, but at the same time, I've come to recognize that every man that has sat before me communicating that they have, certain challenges around, let's say, pornography or, drugs or substances, or maybe even cheating, I've come to recognize as well at the same time the deep helplessness that they felt in those moments. And not necessarily, it wasn't so much the desire to do something malicious. It didn't come from a place of carelessness. Every time I saw a man who deeply cared, who deeply loved, but at the same time, there was a lot of aspects that he didn't know how to be with at that time that he needed to find some relief from. And so I'm curious to hear what that experience was like for you. And yeah, maybe I'm wondering if you're open to sharing some of the stress that was present for you that kind of led, and what were you trying to get relief from?
Yeah, I can really relate to that. As stupid as that might sound, but I always loved my wife, and still I had these behaviors and was cheating. And what I would say is, like, today I definitely want to take, let's say, responsibility for, my actions. So while it is true that there's always a choice, sometimes I don't feel that choice. And that stress and that pressure and that meaninglessness needed to go somewhere. So from an objective level, I'd say, yes, for sure, I can always make the right decision, whatever right means. And then sometimes it's not available.
Yes.
By the way, I felt at that point it wasn't available. And that's like a thing that I'm not kind of, let's say, managing, like taking that responsibility, but also not getting into a place where I kind of, let's say, yeah, beat myself up for it, all the time, and like go into heavy self-judgment. And yeah, for me, it has been, from my experience, it has been exactly that. Like this not expressing of myself, this not asking for help, because like it didn't feel safe to me to say, hey, I am overwhelmed, I need help, and I need to be hold. And the sad thing is that if I had these things today, I can see how my environment, especially my wife or even other people, would have probably been able to hold me in overwhelm and to hold me in pain and to hold me in emotions and stuff. I simply didn't know or wouldn't believe that this is available. So then these things seem to be the only option. And rationally, I also back then, I knew this is not the only option, but there was simply no energy and no capacity left to deal with these things and to allow whatever was behind these coping mechanisms to actually, like, say, be with these emotions and allow them to flow through me. And there was simply I need to get away and out of that. And yeah, I think for me, like, the way forward is seeing what I've done, taking responsibility for it, and at the same time, I would always say there's probably right now in this very moment a person that really needs to watch and use porn to continue living.
100%.
It is needed there for a reason, which doesn't mean it's not a good idea to look at alternatives and to maybe different develop the capacity to actually be with what is and then not having to turn these things. And it's needed.
Mm.
And probably many people don't want to hear that, but these things are there for a reason. And probably the biggest reason why they are there is because I can only speak for myself, but I think it's true for many people. I haven't learned how to actually navigate the human experience in terms of how I relate to the world, how I feel, what is actually an emotion, where does it come from, what does it want from me, does it have a message, how can I be with that, emotions are not dangerous, these type of things. I haven't learned how to navigate these things.
I believe 99%, maybe even 100% of the human population can definitely put themselves in that same boat.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And then at some point I'm at a point where I'm so down and like I have no energy and I'm depressed and like and I'm also at a point where I was at a point where I was like, fuck all of that, fuck everyone.
Yeah.
And now I just do that. Knowing that it's wrong, but whatever, like world is against me. So I might as well just do that to escape my reality right now.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that really stuck with me is something that one of my coaches have said to me, which I believe as well originates from Gabor Mate, the therapist who specializes in trauma. But he spoke to that an abnormal response to an abnormal environment is normal.
Yep.
And
I agree.
and that really stood out for me. If we are really in such an abnormal environment where we are cut off from our emotions, when we're cut off from our own expression, from what's true, when we believe that we cannot be who we are and we cannot be as we are, then of course we'll have to find some way to get relief from the pain of living in disconnection from ourselves. Yeah. And naturally, there's a lot of compensatory patterns that have come, especially over I'm going to say the last few decades, that are readily available to everyone. And, just speaking as well to some of my own challenges, porn was definitely one of my biggest ones. First of all, I want to just name how humbling it was for me to recognize, even when the desire was, all right, I don't want to watch this anymore, I'm done. Like when that desire came, it took me years. It took me fucking years to come out of it. And I just want to openly admit the desire is still there. The craving is still there. Put me in an environment where I'm isolated, where I feel lonely, where I feel ashamed, where I feel like I need some nurturing or like some form of soothing from my experience. there is a desire
Mm.
that ultimately comes from porn. And, thankfully I have a lot of practices now that I can go to, but it doesn't make it less difficult. It's
Yeah.
still there because that's what I learned in my younger years, and it gave me the relief. And speaking to as well what you said around, there's individuals right now that really need that in order to find some form of relief. I needed that at that time.
Mhm.
Dude, I don't think there wasn't anything else that I
Mhm.
had. I was completely alone, right? So that, again, that doesn't condone the behavior. It does it I can now be in a position where I can take responsibility for it and have moved past it. But at the same time, I think we gotta as well just consider the pain that a lot of
Yeah.
individuals are going through.
Yeah. So like, yeah, and that's what you just said. It's pretty much same here. All these desires still exist inside of me, especially in days where I'm like feeling, for whatever reason, lots of grief and feeling depressed and down. Like these things come up. Now the question is, we have the capacity to choose differently
Mm,
and developing this capacity. And apart from that, also making a different experience. So I give you an example that you probably still remember. So we were at this kind of little man circle that you guided us through like 2 weeks ago. And then that's a situation with Mac's partner. Like really, we were sitting in these exercises and I felt like, fuck, I can't be here right now because, there were so many emotions out of me and like I felt like so much pressure. And that would typically be a situation for me, obviously difficult in a group of people, but a typical situation where I would seek some kind of escape from and not be with the experience. And then I felt like, because I was in the group, I felt like safe and said, hey guys, like I step out here, I go inside the room, like have a cry and I come back. And I did that. And then I came out, I was still kind of a little, I had cried and it was much better, but I was still like feeling, yeah, a little off, so to say, and quite sad and like not really wanting to connect in that moment. And then you came along and said, hey, do you need a hug? And that was exactly what I needed in that moment, a connection from another human being and just being held for a few seconds. And then I was actually able to step back into the group and have a good experience. And that for me, was like a real patterning of something I wouldn't do before. Before I would have hide my emotions. I would have kind of pushed through the experience,
mm,
not being fully there, waited for everyone to disappear so I can finally turn to porn.
yeah.
And I choose a different path this time. So I learned that, hey, actually I can speak to my needs and my truth, and then giving the space to express. And then I'm actually receiving some connection from someone else. I'm being held, and then it was fine, you know?
I appreciate you being willing to share this really honest and courageous example as I see it. And that moment when you spoke up and said, "Hey, I need some space. I need some time to just be with this." I celebrated that. And the reason why I celebrated is because I've been in that same position where I felt like I couldn't do that in the past. And I mean, it's still challenging for me as well to
Totally.
communicate, "Hey, this is what I need," because, there's this risk of, "Oh shit, will they accept me in that moment?" That comes alive for me. So I celebrated that. I welcome that, and it's beautiful just to as well name how important in that moment connection is,
Yeah.
and that I would say being
Hmm.
received as
Mm-hmm.
we are in that moment, and not needing to be different, not needing to be elsewhere, because our whole life, let's say, we've been affirmed that this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this conversation around grief and more kind of this place that you were at around maybe feeling more depressed or feeling a sense of meaninglessness, I want to come back into that, but I want to just bookmark it for now, and I want to just speak into, let's say, the hero's journey that you've been on, coming out of a lot of these patterns that you have created for yourself. I want to hear a little bit more about that. What ended up helping you come out of this identity that you've created for
Hmm.
yourself?
So there are a few things. One is, so definitely the situation with my wife, as I mentioned before, like she was suffering from that DC, and like it helped me to also, let's say, see and realize that, like, while it was stressing me and while it was like reinforcing my coping mechanisms, it helped me to see that life has an end. And it's, I can't avoid that, and it kind of made me, yeah, step back a little bit and also starting to look for deeper truth. And because I was confronted with something that is so existential and like such a big threat that there were no answers anymore. So that definitely helped to, on a mental level, starting to look for deeper truth. And then also like on a very pragmatic, practical basis, because there were no answers for medicine for her, so she started looking into alternative kind of healing modalities, and that led us being at a meditation retreat of Joe Dispenza. And there, like, I arrived there and was like, whatever had, let's say, a certain interest in deeper truth at the same time, while thinking, okay, fuck, like these people are just all fucking crazy, like all these esoteric kind of very strange people, like I don't know what I'm doing here. And then on day 3, also like because I didn't want to screw up the experience for her, I thought, okay, fuck it, let's just try, let's just go into this meditation, and had no expectations. It was a good thing actually. I just did what the guy said, and then it was maybe my second or third meditation or whatever. And man, like in that meditation, I connected to something that is today I would call it like, let's say, universal love. And I came out of that, like today I would say not in the sense of that how I have been told through church and everything, but I knew that God exists and God exists inside of me. And I had my heart wide open, and like,
could you describe that experience more for the individuals who like
it's
have no understanding of it?
It's like, if someone has ever, of the listeners, has ever taken MDMA, it's like MDMA times 10 million. It's just it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced to that point. Strong connection. I felt my heart. It was opening, and I felt loved, and I just felt loved basically, and I felt connected, and I felt a super strong connection also to my wife. And to illustrate it, like on that day, so usually if I would, let's say, give a speech or anything, I would be like very rigid, very kind of have everything planned, what I want to say, what I don't say, and have like clear script, stuff like that. That day, at the end of the day, I got up in front of like 50, 60 people, like to share, like we were invited to share the experiences. I was standing there sharing, and I was crying, in front of that. And before, like, I wouldn't, let's say, shed any tear in front of anyone, not even my wife. And yeah, man, I was just such an intense feeling of being alive and being connected and being in love with everything. Yeah, kind of within the body, it felt like a pretty intense orgasm that wouldn't disappear. Maybe to have shared a bit on a body level.
It seemed that this experience was more important to you than any of the money that you created for yourself.
Totally. That was the starting point of, starting to believe in there is something else. It's not like just that hope or that thought or that interest. Is
you have the experience.
Yeah, I had the experience. I knew that there are new and different answers. Now, that didn't help me to, let's say, stop all of these behaviors within one day, but it opened a new perspective, and over time led me to find breathwork and Zen meditation and working with great teachers and coaches, and that put me on a different track, and eventually helped me to kind of really let go of these behaviors and start to live from a more authentic and more honest place and speak truth to my wife. And also to be here right now and like share with you openly is a part of that journey basically, and not hiding anything anymore.
Yeah.
And it was really that experience.
Could you describe a bit more of that journey of what you had to move through? And I'll call it a healing journey. So as you embarked on that journey, what were you confronted with, and what changes did you need to make in your life?
So the main things were, let's say, this event was like, say, the meditation and Joe Dispenza event. Then I dived a bit into plant medicine, the ayahuasca, these type of things. And while I had great experiences, I found it quite difficult to actually then make changes in my day-to-day, especially since I was hiding so much shit from the outside, especially from my wife. And at some point, when I came across breathwork, and more specifically the conscious connected breathing that we're also doing here in Bali, that was, or there I had also like a breakthrough moment where I, actually connected to deep sadness, but also deep love in a journey I had, and really brought me back to feeling more. And then basically started to Yeah, speak more truth. And a big part of that speaking more truth was actually being truthful with my wife. That was massive challenge. Like first of all, I needed her to actually increase some pressure on me to actually start speaking the truth. So like the two things came together. I was more ready for it, but at the same time, she kind of, put some pressure on me. And then my system was still very strong. And like I'd say I've been a trained liar. So like the moment, let's say, a core need and in a certain way, let's say, being accepted and loved by her is it's been one of my core needs, was at risk, I would rather choose to lie instead of speaking the truth. So it took us like 3 kind of events over a year for me to fully expose the full truth to her, because I would always like give her a version that I could believe, yeah, she will be able to handle that and still love me. If I hide this but show her that, then I will be fine. So that was probably for the past year, like 2023, the biggest thing for me to work through that.
If I can just jump
Yeah,
in here,
sure, go ahead.
I'm wondering, what did that do for you? Because like one of the things that I consistently speak to with men is this or I speak into this theme or this conversation around integrity. You
Mhm,
know, what does it really require you in order to be in integrity with yourself and
mhm.
as well your environment? And it seems like you starting to speak truth, you not necessarily hiding or lying anymore, was your own pursuit towards deeper integrity, towards deeper alignment. So I'm wondering, what did that do for you?
What it did for me is mm, it brings me just much closer to myself. It's actually, I had, after speaking more truth, I had the first moments of actually feeling free or feeling freedom
Yeah.
or feeling like I can be with whatever is. And I noticed my capacity for handling, my emotions, but also the emotions of others went up. And a bigger sense of, yeah, being present and ease
Mm,
and being in peace. And now by now I can, whenever I do not speak my truth, there starts something, a discomfort in my body starts to build up that I
mm,
can't hold anymore for very long. I think it's still important to kind of find the right moment, like, and check in with the other person, like, are you available for truth? Do you have the capacity to receive it right now, and so on. And that's no matter relationship, business, and it doesn't matter where. But then when there is a space to then actually share it, and by now I can't really hold to, let's say, things that are true for me and I haven't expressed for much longer, because also the reward, the way I feel afterwards, and the groundedness and the presence and the aliveness that comes with it is so good that I don't want to like miss that anymore.
absolutely.
Which doesn't mean it's not challenging, man. Like
Course.
sometimes I'm like, fuck, I would much rather die than sharing that now. And then I still choose to share, and then usually it's relieving. And but now I'm pretty grateful for having now people in my life where I can actually practice that. So for one of the companies that I co-founded, that's also in the coaching and breathwork space, with Peter and Renee. Yeah, we there have built a foundation among us and also within the company that really also pushes me to speak my truth. And I really try to do that as much as I can. And the feedback that I receive and the way that we operate is reinforcing that story that, oh, it's actually welcome. It might be super edgy, but it's actually welcome. And we as a group can move forward by everyone speaking and sharing their truth.
Yeah.
So that's an experience that I'm very grateful for. And also with my ex-partner, like, we also got to a stage where a way more open sharing is available, because she has a very strong capacity to actually handle and receive it. And also my capacity goes up. So I'm very grateful for that relationship as well. And I see more and more people coming into life that actually encourage me to speak up. And even like they see I would maybe be hiding something, would say, hey, is there something you want to say? So yeah, and also like seeking more experiences, like the one thing that we did with the Man Circle, also in our work, really building an environment that helps me to bring that part out. And that is ultimately a big part of, for me, feeling free, is just being fully myself. And for me, that means allowing whatever is present to be expressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming back to the image that you've had to create for yourself, what one has to imply is that we're not okay as we are. We're not welcome as we are. And so what that does is it actually creates a lot of internalized shame for a lot of individuals. That's kind of like the biggest thing that I see. And shame can only live in the basement. It can only live in the dark. But as soon as we start speaking it, first of all, some of these things can come to the surface. And from my experience, as uncomfortable as it is, in the moment, in the short term, the relief that comes on the other side of that, and the liberation and the expansion that one feels is without a doubt much more rewarding than the initial discomfort that one will have to go through in order to go there. One of the things that you kept on coming back to was this sense of grief that you felt, and that sense of as well depression or a sense of meaninglessness that you've as well went through at particular stages during this journey. And I'm wondering, what is your connection to that now, or what has that journey been like for you? Because one of the things that one of the reasons why I believe this conversation is valuable is because I see, especially among men, the conversation around grief is deep in the basement. It's deeply hidden and we don't acknowledge it. And at the same time, I found great, immense value in actually building a relationship to this aspect of me. And so I want to hear a little bit more about that, how it showed up for you, and then as well create a dialogue around that.
So I would say it's something that, while it has been present for me for many, many, many years, even before the coping mechanisms and other stuff started, I wouldn't be really aware of it. And whenever it would come up, I would try to create some kind of a nice experience or get a drink or something to kind of get away from it.
What do you believe you were grieving at that time already?
Yeah, I would say I was grieving a few things. One is I was grieving me not being myself, the loss of the connection to self, and the general. That's something I'm still grieving. The general separation, like I'm here and there's a world, and I'm not connected. I'm disconnected from it, and yeah, I would say this is what I've been. And also, in a certain way, I was grieving around there's this, I'm separated from the world, but on top of that, it's a dangerous place. There's a threat, and I can't be myself. And if I'm fully myself and also in my vulnerability and everything, I will be hurt and damaged. So I can't be that. And there was always a part of me that it's just that for not being allowed to be there. And I think that was I was grieving, the separation, disconnection, this not allowing myself to be.
This is really interesting because I'm observing this as well a lot more in myself. And you spoke to a few elements, the grief of not being oneself, the grief of being disconnected to oneself, the grief of let's say the greater connection to everything if we come under this, like premise that we are all interconnected, which I personally believe in, and I imagine you as well personally believe in. If we feel like we're separate and isolated and autonomous, completely on our own from that place, that is a very harsh, let's say, reality to live from, especially if we want to add as well kind of a dialogue around the world is dangerous, the world is a not caring place to be, and I got to protect myself from getting hurt. There's a lot here. There's a lot here that is demanding of us to be closed, to not be heart open, to be disconnected. And it sounds like that is a big piece that came up for you, and I can personally relate to as well in my own journey of grief. So what happened for you when you started acknowledging that this grief was there?
So yes, I started, like, for many years I haven't been aware of what it is. It was just that underlying thing, like, that I wouldn't turn to. Then, let's say, it was followed by a bit of time where I thought, okay, I work through my shit now. I start speaking truth everywhere, and like I get rid of more the coping mechanisms, and that will do it, and then that will disappear. And to a certain degree, it did. Like, I'd say there's, let's say, a baseline of grief, and then on top there is what I would maybe call, let's say, self-created grief through behaviors and beliefs and, the way I live and damage to my dopamine receptors through all the porn and other stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I worked through many of these levels, I would say. Probably not all of them, but many of them. They probably never worked through all of them, by the way. But anyway, it's a different story. So I worked through many of them. I was like, fuck, like, it's still there, But what I would still say is that through the work I did, like, let's say I was able to reduce the number of days I would feel like an immense sense of grief to like less than, let's say even 2 years ago or so. But anyway, so that was helpful, but I was of the idea, oh, it's going to disappear. So then whenever it came up, I would say, oh, fuck you again. And I would resist it. With the resistance leads to, oh, I don't want to be in my experience right now. I don't want to be here with that grief and sadness and whatever. So guess what? Like, coping mechanisms come alive, So then I started to, and it's actually something I'm starting to explore recently. Now these things come up, and then I'm taking time and space to be with them and to be with that grief and sit in it, which can look like getting up and then spending 2 hours between sitting in silence and having some tears coming out and just going between these two states and allowing stuff to move through me. That was an important trick for me, to actually allow it to be there and not resist it. But it's probably a fine line between being present with the experience and not, let's say, becoming the experience. Because if I become the reef and like fall into that dark hole, then it can also be potentially dangerous depending on where I am at in terms of my, mental capacity and everything.
100%.
So I want to say that it's build us the capacity to be with it and not becoming it and then living from that place, but kind of, really relating to the grief, as that's one of my favorite authors always saying, like, relate to the grief or relate to the pain instead of like from it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to practice. And that brought an important change in terms of like, definitely, let's say, decreases my desire to escape my reality when these things come up. And I can, not always, sometimes I just fucking hate it when it happens, but sometimes when I've done the work and been with it for quite some time, then on the other end, there starts to emerge a sense of being connected to life. So sometimes I can even see it's like it's a gift in a certain way. Like, it connects me to, or it reconnects me actually, because it reminds me of the connection that's always there, that it's all one, and it's all an expression of the divine in the end. So sometimes I have these really beautiful experiences with it, and then sometimes I'm it and just, fuck, it's too much. It's too much. And then it can be good to have a tool set of, let's say, healthy coping mechanisms and just deal with it and maybe get out of it without having fully processed it. So I would say I'm in exploration phase.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I have like a fully aligned, clear process of how to deal with it every time, but I'm changing my relationship to it clearly.
There's a lot in what you said, and we've had some beautiful dialogues as well in this conversation of grief. And, just want to as well bring my own personal take to it. There's a time a bit over 2 years ago where I could not escape my own grief any longer. And all the patterns that I've created as well for myself to dismiss this aspect of myself, it was right in front of me. And the only way was through. And starting to learn about grief, through particular teachers. Francis Weller is one of them. There's another individual called Joshua Winner who I had on the podcast. I came to understand this texture of grief on a deeper level. And I've come to understand that, first of all, as a culture, we carry a well of grief. And that grief, as I see it, from what I've experienced so far, and I'll tell you guys if that ever changes, but it appears to me that grief will always be there.
Yeah.
It will always be there. And so, as you said, can I start relating to it? Can I not push it away? Can I not reject it? Can I not dismiss it? Can I not try to as well out-breathe my way from it? And can I try not to escape it, but actually have it be an aspect of my life? One of the beautiful things that I heard Joshua Winner say, which I believe comes as well from one of his mentors, is this premise that we're broken and whole at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's, if I feel into myself, that's truly what I feel. there is this deep knowing how whole and integrated I am. But if I truly tune into it, there's a part of me that feels broken.
Mhm.
And there's a part of me that feels like shattered, just by the amount of pain that's present in me, the pain that I see in others. And I can tap into that quite quickly,
Yeah.
actually. And I love what you shared around not relating from the grief, but relating to the grief, because of course there's a lot of nuance in this conversation. It's, first of all, speaking into the value of it, it seems that it's given you a sense of connection, but I found as well it's given me deeper depth
Mm.
to life and a sense of meaning, the meaning that I was ultimately looking for as well for so many years. However, of course, there's a danger of being consumed by it, by being identified by it, by then wallowing in it.
Yeah.
And from that place, life can get very cynical. Life can get very dark. And my encouragement to anyone who listens into this is a really good time then to as well ask for help, and so support in those experiences. And in particular as well with grief, I found grief needs to be witnessed.
Yeah.
Grief needs to be seen. Grief needs to be acknowledged and to be contained so we can truly grieve as well. So I see that as well as an important element, that we can't just hold it on our own, and we actually need other individuals who can hold us. I remember one experience I had when I was going through that breakup over 2 years ago. I had a mentor at the time, and I reached out to him because I was desperate. I was, I was really at the breaking point of like suicidal ideation. So I was terrified. And I remember when we dropped into our first session, and he just looked at me with these deep, deep eyes of compassion and this deep eyes of like, wow, like you're really going through it right now. And he didn't even speak in those first moments. And all he asked me to do was, let's just take this time right now and let's just breathe together. And and we just looked each other in the eyes, through the screen actually. And we were breathing together. And I believe it was the breath, like the fourth breath, where I just collapsed to the floor and just let out all of it. And I wasn't just crying, I was wailing. I was wailing for just the despair that I felt, the desperation,
Mm.
the brokenness that I felt inside of me. And he was just holding me through it. And he was just guiding me, and I was just listening, and he just allowed me to really be humbled by life. And I can tell you there was something when I came out of that experience. I don't know how long it lasted. I imagine around 10, 15, 20 minutes. But once I came out of it, I felt more whole. I felt more meaning again. And it gave me the power to not give up. And I've come to recognize that if I didn't have him in that moment, I don't think I could have gone as deep. I really needed someone to hold me in that moment so I can truly go into that experience of just being the experiencer, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So I
Yeah.
don't have to hold myself in that moment, but I can truly, truly tap into the collapse.
Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
that went really deep.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man. Very,
Yeah.
very powerful.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying. Like sometimes it's just being held is sometimes enough, and then I can just be in the experience and let it go fully. And I believe if I had known that this would be available many years ago, I could have avoided quite some suffering for not only for me but also for many other people.
Yeah.
Because probably that's all what would have been needed. But yeah, and it takes some courage to actually ask for it to be held. But
100%.
yeah, it's fascinating. It only takes but it just takes like two humans connecting, then magic can happen.
Mm. I'd like to pivot a little bit,
Sure.
and I would like to speak a little bit more about men's work
Mm.
and your relationship to men, and as well this idea of being a man and masculinity and interest. That's as well one of the ways that we came to connect with each other as well. And I actually found a very interesting LinkedIn post from yours,
Mm.
where you actually addressed your relationship to men, and it seems that relationship was in many ways as well a driving factor in your pursuit. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and
Sure.
how you viewed men for, let's say, the majority of your life?
Viewed and still sometimes view, it's still there's that part of still existence out of me. Also, I'm working with it. Yeah, I would say that, let's say, not so much in one-on-one settings, but especially in group settings, I would perceive groups as pure competition. I would kind of check out on which level I can compete, and then if there's a group where I can't win, let's say, on enough levels, and when I say win, like through the lens of society in terms of, okay, status, money, body shape, these type of things, then the group would not be attractive to me. I would choose groups where I can kind of win. And yeah, I felt like a strong sense of competition, of needing to compete to show off and be better. And that creates an immense level of stress and like, yeah, quite some effort and energy needed to maintain something like that. And actually, I wasn't, let's say, really like displaying that competition. It was more like kind of an internal thing for myself. It's completely crazy, actually. And that is like directly opposed with my true desire for deep connection and heart opening and being fully authentic and not only, let's say, allowing myself to be fully myself and be expressive and having emotions, but also, providing that as an opportunity for others. So these two things kind of in a certain way exclude each other. So if I see you as a competitor and a threat, and I'm actually inside of me, actually at war with you, how do I then want to establish a deep heart-to-heart connection with you? It doesn't work,
Yeah.
So I would never, in terms of, let's say, being whole and being connected with other men, I never got what I truly wanted because I had all these stories going on. And yeah, a big part of when we speak about men's work, a big part for me is to let go of these stories and to connect with other men on a much deeper level.
I can very much relate to that. I imagine every man on here, or pretty much most of them, can very much listen to this or relate to this narrative. And the thing that I found, let's say for myself and a lot of individuals, I don't know if you can relate to it as well, but I've come to recognize that a lot of the competition that I was searching out for was a lot of the time my pursuit for recognition, my pursuit for love, usually from a masculine figure, my father. And there was this desire to receive his support, to receive his love, and as well to receive his blessing. And I've seen the complete absence of that. That's maybe too strong. I've seen important moments, the absence of that, whether it was physically or emotionally, and that led in many ways to this, let's say, more sickening way of needing to constantly prove myself and drive towards success, pursuit, let's go, next thing. And that, of course, naturally as well directed itself towards my connections with other men because they were a threat to that pursuit for recognition, acceptance, and love. And so, of course, in many ways, I've had to see them as my enemy. And so, and as well, I would say that's the cultural frame.
Yeah.
That's the cultural norm that even if you didn't have those wounds, I imagine you'll still be to some degree impacted, influenced, or indoctrinated into that system.
First of all, I can totally relate to that. Since the end, it's also for me, it's been covering up a true desire for being seen, being recognized and feeling support actually. And yeah, my father has also been quite absent from, let's say, age 12 on or something like that. So yeah, all of these things I never really received, especially not when I kind of like started, let's say, go out into the world and go into my own endeavors. I never felt like that level of support and, I'm here with you and stuff. So that totally makes sense. And then I would say that even, let's say, there's a perfect upbringing and like extremely conscious mom and dad, everything is perfect, then I would still enter a system that is built upon competing and on it needs constant growth and it achieves that growth through competition. Just look at in a typical company setup, like lots of conversations are around, okay, who are our competitors? How can we be better? Blah, blah, blah. And I think while there is for sure a healthy, playful way of competing with each other. I believe to a large extent, especially in the way that we operate businesses, it's not playful and it's not healthy. It's toxic and it's not based on what we as, let's say, humans truly need. It's actually going against our nature. It's going against the fact that deep inside we have, I can't speak on myself, but I know that I'm connected to everyone and everything. So now if I'm competing in a very aggressive, very toxic kind of way, then that goes against my deepest feelings of truth. And that ultimately is very hurtful.
How would you propose navigating those aspects? Because as you already alluded to, I feel they're very innate to us. There is something in my more masculine spirit, I'll say, that wants to compete and loves to compete. And I think, as you already communicated, there's really healthy aspects to it. Simultaneously, I also believe that, I'm referring to one of the books that definitely shaped me as well in many ways. It's called The Way of Men by Jack Donovan, and he speaks to 4 tactical virtues that speak to that expression of masculinity. And he referred to this idea of honor. And I believe that is ultimately a big one that a lot of us are seeking for when we're trying to get ahead, when we're trying to outwork the other individual. What we're trying to pursue is coming from a position where we want to be recognized ultimately, and we want to be honored. So coming back to my question, how would you propose navigating those impulses for competition or honor?
So speaking from my experience, what has been extremely helpful is sports, especially martial arts, has been like kind of offloading parts of these energies through that, where like there's a clear container with clear boundaries where I can like fully act out that energy, and then coming out of it, I can see other energies. Only, let's say, half of it is gone. So then there's way less need to compete outside of that arena. I'd also say, it doesn't always need to be sports. It can also just be kind of in a certain way playful explorations, little games with like other men, stuff like that. It's definitely way more difficult in the context of business. And that's something where I don't, let's say, don't have clear answers right now. Something that I've kind of, the question that I'm sitting with is okay, like, on the one hand, we are all part of that system, and we need the capitalism. It needs to keep going in a certain way for the lifestyle that is there, and in a certain way it relies on competition and on growth and all of these things. So we don't really have an answer how to kind of, let's say, make that be less present in the way that we run companies or anything like that. But I think a big part is simply like allowing everyone, like allowing themselves to have a space in a clear, safe container to act out some of that energy.
Yeah, and just my own personal take. I won't speak, let's say, more into businesses or big organizations or big groups, but I think a big piece of it comes back to our day-to-day interactions and really approaching life from what I would say more relational way of viewing life. If I see you as my enemy, I won't give a fuck about you.
Yeah.
Right. But if I really come from this position of, okay, like maybe we will have some form of competition, or maybe we have something there, but I still come from this position. Okay, this is a human being in front of me. This is as well an individual who has his own experience, who has his own needs, who has his own fears, has his own desires and own longings, wishes, dreams. If I can truly see the humanness inside of you that also exists in me, I would approach the way I relate to you very differently. And so I wonder if we can approach every experience from that position, how that will naturally as well impact the way we do business, the way we run bigger organizations. That's just kind of like my personal feedback to that.
That's true. I mean, like in theory, what could work, just as an idea here, but like before we open any meeting or conversation or whatever, no matter if in business or whatever else, we spend 5 minutes to like really acknowledge and connect in our humanness and to establish connection. Could be something easy like, I don't know, 3-breath eye gaze, whatever, something like that. And just make it as a rule. And I think with that, there could be like a deeper level of, actually coming together as human beings and recognizing that in each other. Something like that,
I love that. Yeah. And while it's subtle, it will have its impact. And I imagine it will as well have strong ripples out
Yeah.
to the way we operate. We'll slowly start to wind down with this conversation. It has been absolutely an epic conversation, and there's so much that we went into. There's a lot as well that we didn't go into that I would have loved to go into as well, more on the business side of things, but we'll have to do that another time. First of all, I want to just have a moment here just to acknowledge you. And I just want to say thank you and acknowledge and appreciate just the level of transparency, the level of honesty that you've brought to this conversation today, the willingness to really bare yourself. And that's how I've met you, from our first interaction together. And that's what I've consistently seen as well in you. And I've always loved this balance with you around your capacity to be humble, but at the same time be very bold and know as well like what you have to offer and the value that you provide. And I see that it's usually like a balance that not a lot of individuals, let's say, can wield at the same time with both hands. So just really want to honor you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed this conversation and the depth that we went to. Thanks for this.
Where can our listeners find you, and are there any offerings or services that you would like our listeners to be aware of?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. If you just search for my name, they can find me and reach out to me. And then in terms of offering services, I've co-founded a company. It's based in Berlin. It's called Really Align. That is offering a embodied coaching breathwork approach. That is, the main thing I'm focused on in terms of business.
So I'll make sure as well to put all those things in the show notes so any listeners can fall back to that if they desire to. And we'll close it off with a parting question. And it's going to be more of a deeper question. But I'm going to invite you to maybe package it in, let's say, a minute or less. But one of the things that we connected on initially was you spoke to the fact that one of your deepest desires is to live and breathe from an open heart, especially in your intimate relationships. Based on this entire journey that you've been on, why is that now the number one thing? Why is that so important?
Because it makes me feel alive, ultimately. I feel alive, I feel free. And this way of feeling is, it's the most valuable thing to me. And I've realized there's no money in the world or whatever can buy me that. And it's just that super strong desire inside of me to live in that way. And it makes me be at peace with everything and gives me ultimate resilience to weather whatever it's, happening in life. And it's just it's a freedom of the demand. It's a freedom of the constant demand.
Incredible. Well, that's a beautiful way to wrap it up. All right. For all the listeners who have checked in, again, thanking you, Bjoern, for coming on. And for all the listeners, thank you as well if you are still listening up to this point. As always, I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation. In case you have any questions, any insights that you want to share with both of us, feel free to reach out. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.